Some of our younger students wanted to ask, while we're on your education, about your practicing and how you practice as a young child or as a teenager, and then at the Paris Conservatory, and even today. Do you have anything to share with us on that?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, I don't practice the same thing today I was practicing in the beginning nor while I was a student, because first of all, the time factor is different, the needs are different, the world is different, and what I'm going to play is different also. So I need to keep myself in good shape physically. This I do by normally, except in this very particular situation that we're all living across the planet right now. But by performing concerts every day or every other day and rehearsals the other day, so therefore by keeping yourself in the performance mode, you don't lose shape. So it's important when you don't have performances or you don't have competitions, when you don't have goals, to play every day to your flute, not just to practice, but to play. You make for yourself a little video or a little mini concert, a mini recital. You learn something and then the next day you record it, one movement maybe at a time. And then you look at it. And while you look at these things, you make your own criticism. And by doing it so, you can start making a lot of progress. Constructive self-criticism is probably the best thing you do. Being trained by the French Flute School, I've done all the books by Moïse and started then later on doing daily exercise, as it says in the word daily, which means one every day in every keys. Like Taffanel and Gobert, for example, I love, and when I say I love, I do. Those scales are beautiful, number 4. And the arpeggios, number 6 or number 10, are just amazing. Or there's another book also by Reichert, for example. Number 4 is also a brilliant way to play scales and arpeggios, like wandering around in the various keys that we are going to play, in the 12 keys, major and minor, plus 1 octave higher, if possible. And what I do is I play, if one day I play number 4 to warm up, next day I will play number 6, and the day after I will play number 4 by Reichert, and the day after I will play number 10 by Taffanel and Gobert, and then I will be back to Taffanel and Gobert number 4, but I will start from a different key. And I will play combinations with rhythms, with articulation, dynamics, so that each key has a different color, different flavor. One of my teachers in the Paris Conservatoire, Michel Debos, was half American, and when he was then teaching in Berlin, Ohio, he published a book about different variations, rhythm variations, melodic variations, rhythm variations, dynamic variations on the Taffanel and Gobert number 4 scales. And if you do that every day and always start with a different key, you never practice exactly the same. It's always a different combination of rhythm, articulation, dynamic, tempo, key. Therefore, it's enlarging your horizon as a flute player. So the more you start making something out of the exercise that you're actually practicing on, the daily exercise, the more you will make your horizon wider in the mastery of the instruments. But it's important to do this again every day in order to keep all these little muscles that we have here around the lips in motion, because there's about 130 muscles plus here. It's not just like bringing the lips together and blowing onto the instrument. We don't play a lip instrument. Every other instrument, wind instrument, controls the vibration precisely through the lips. We don't. We just have an air stream. We don't vibrate with the lips. All the other instruments control the vibration with the lips directly. So it's a lot more about making the delicate air stream, shaping it in order for the contact with the instrument to be ideal, in order to make the most beautiful sound as possible. And for this, you need to keep training subtly, very subtly, those muscles every day. Otherwise, you lose very quickly. If I don't practice for 3 days because I'm traveling across the continent to go on holiday, I will need a week to come back. It takes about, for each day you don't practice, it takes 2 days to come back to the same level. So even on my most wanted holidays, I would always take my flute with me, and play a little bit, 15 minutes, 20 minutes every day, just to keep, to keep things in motion and to make sure that the playing doesn't suffer too much.
Well, that's great advice. One of our participants here today, Brendan Dooley, had a question that he sent over when you were mentioning the French school and the different influences from various cultures. And Brendan, would you like to ask your question? Or do you want me to ask?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to know if you've noticed any real consistent differences between different countries or schools of flute playing, from going to school in France and playing in Germany or just around Europe and the world?
Yes and no. Indeed, if every place has a little bit of a different training, but now all the books by Marcel Moïse have been translated in many different languages. Nearly every teacher worldwide is using Taffanin and Gobert scales, or even if they're not Taffanin and Gobert scales, they're inspired by them. And they have been explained in a different way, in a different matter, in a different language. If you take the books by Pahudwa, it's mostly the translation in English of the Marcel Moïse exercise, and all of that. So therefore, it has become a lot more international, but still there are variations and different variants everywhere. What is different is more the sound aesthetics, is more the culture. So for whom am I playing what, where? And so how should I address the people? Therefore, how should I project the music and the needs that the artists have in different countries and different cultures can be very different. And therefore, they will use their instruments in very different ways. And this is where you have to learn to master the instrument at the top of your possibilities in order to be able to switch when you're on tour from one way of playing to the other one. Because if I'm playing, let's say, with a Utah Symphony, I'm not going to play this music the same way I was playing with Sao Paulo, and not in the same way I will be playing in Paris or in Berlin or in London, for example. Just the pitch is different, the acoustics of the hall is different, the sound from the orchestra or from the piano is different, so you got to match this. I do this by practicing a lot in the concert hall, rehearsing or practicing as much as possible, not in my hotel room, because I'm never going to play public in my hotel room. So I needn't practice there. I try to use also the projection, the acoustics of the hall. Every string instrument have their own resonance body with them. Every piano, harpsichord, harp do have their resonance body with them. We don't, so we need to match constantly with the hall. And it's also a way to avoid stress a lot. If you go when you have an audition, when you have a performance, the day before, or if possible, or the week before, at a different time in that day, and just check out the location, the temperature, the light, where are the restrooms, where's the water point, is there coffee, should I bring a sandwich, how is the piano tuned, what is the way to stage? Are there steps or not? Am I comfortable with these kind of shoes or not? And this kind of, you can check out all these kind of things beforehand, and then you don't get a surprise when you get in the situation. It takes a lot of stress away, and you can deliver a much better performance. So all of this are things, I think, the more you rehearse in the space that you're going to perform, the better it's going to be also in the same time, and the more you're going to adjust your way of playing to the place in order to deliver the best possible message. So that implies also changing sound, changing articulation, and all of these kind of things. I mean, there's a lot of components when we talk about this. It starts with the breathing, then it's the articulation, the air support, the resonance, and if I play in a church or if I play in a very dry acoustic, I'm not going to play the same length of notes. I'm not going to play the same sharpness in the attack either. I'm not going to tongue necessarily in the same place between the lips, behind the upper teeth, behind the lower teeth, or on top of the palate, for example. All these kind of things are details, but if you combine all of them together, you can try to make the best possible approach for one or the other place that you're playing in.
That's fascinating. Rosemary Rice had a question. Rosemary, do you want to ask it yourself regarding performing in different countries?
Sure, I just wondered if he could, I wondered if he could give details of what styles or aesthetics were prevalent in different countries, maybe contrast Japan and France or whatever comes to mind.
Yeah. Mm. It's a bit difficult to put in words out of the context. It's rather something that you experience while you're making music. You see how the people are, and of course we know that people of different cultures behave differently. The more so if it's a collective, you're dealing with a collective, like with an orchestra, for example. So Asian orchestras, for example, we shouldn't think that Japanese people are like Chinese people or like Korean people, like people from Taiwan or from Singapore. They actually, within China, there's just so many different cultures also. It's a continent for itself. Also, in the United States, I would say there's not one way on the East Coast, one way on the West Coast, one way in the North, one way in the South. You know, people learn to play together. It depends also if I play with a pianist, if I play with an orchestra. People learn to play together by their cultural background, by the fact that they've been trained in the same place. For example, if you go to Vienna, a lot of the people in the Vienna Philharmonic or in the Vienna Opera House have been trained in the Vienna Conservatory, wherever they come from. So it's they are all grown in the same model, and it's easy for them to play together. But now take an example like the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. When we audition, we do not specifically try out the people before that have been studying in Berlin, because first of all, Berlin was a split city until 20 years ago. And now it's a metropolis that has a lot of people coming in, going out, etc. It's not at all the same kind of musical center with a lot of tradition like Vienna is. It's exactly the opposite. We try to make a best of international talents, and then we'll learn to play together when we get there. So it's a very different philosophy, different strategy. Japanese orchestras usually are very silent, very disciplined, and as a collective, you might want to ask them to do something, not one time, but 2 times, maybe 3 times or 4 times, until it really happens, until there is really a difference, because there is a tradition of saying yes to everything and not being allowed to say no. So therefore, with whatever you ask, they will always say yes, but whether they'll do it or not, that's a different thing. So that brings you sometimes in very funny situations. Of course, German mentality or Nordic mentality in Europe, Scandinavian or Germanic mentality is very different to Anglo-Saxon mentality, more in the UK or in the US, and is very different to Southern Europe, for example, Spanish, French, or Italian, Latin mentality, where it's much more difficult to bring people together, because French, Italian, or Spanish musicians have a tendency to play their solos. If they have a solo position in an orchestra, they will play everything as a soloist. While in Germany, or in the German tradition, there will always be part of a collective, and you will have as a conductor to ask them to come out more, to stick out more during the solo. So the approach is different. It's very hard to make examples like this, but with all that's available on YouTube nowadays, you can listen to so many different interpretations of the same piece in different places and make for yourself an idea of what you can expect from different musical cultures.
Yes, and even as he said, even in the United States, if you compare how the LA Philharmonic might approach a piece versus the Boston Symphony, there's quite a difference there. And from conductor to conductor in these cultures.